longer session. So the sixth quality is this Anuttaro Purasa Dhamma Sarati, meaning unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. We've briefly examined this before when we've looked at the trainee's mode of progress. And if you remember, the sutta is the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta. And it's at the end of that discourse on the analysis of the six sense spheres, where it gives this explanation about the Buddha being called the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. So rather than thinking that the Buddha is called this because of the different kinds of people he's helped, because this is the commonly said thing, oh, the Buddha's helped a murderer, the Buddha's helped a beggar, the Buddha's helped a farmer, the Buddha's helped a king. It's actually much, much more than that. And so when we go to the actual definition or explanation of what it means for the Buddha to be the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, what we see is more Dhamma. And a lot of this Dhamma we do practice. So some we may not, but some we actually do through our sutta meditations. So there's something that resonates when you realize, oh, this is what makes the Buddha the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. So if we go to the Salayatana Vibhanga Sutta, what it says is, among the teachers of training, it is he that is called unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed. So it was said. And with reference to what was it said? Was this said? Guided by the elephant tamer bhikkhus, the elephant to be tamed goes in one direction, east, west, north, or south. Guided by the horse tamer bhikkhus, the horse to be tamed goes in one direction, east, west, north, or south. Guided by the ox tamer bhikkhus, the ox to be tamed goes in one direction, east, west, north, or south. Bhikkhus, guided by the Tathagata, accomplished and fully enlightened, the person to be tamed goes in 8 directions. So, what we can see, and we'll go through this, the Buddha is incomparable because he teaches these 8 directions. So what's the first one? Possessed of material form, he sees forms. This is the first direction. This first direction taught by the Buddha is really about kasina meditations, where we develop a very strong internal perception so that we can go beyond the color or appearance of form. And this is better explained in the Patisambhidamagga. So if we take an example, if we develop the yellow kasina internally, so the yellow color, and we apply it to whatever is in the world that is in our mind. So everything that we see, we regard as yellow color. And we can make it very vast in our mind so that we perceive the whole world in our mind as yellow. So when we have diversity of color, like when we have our eyes open, we go to the supermarket or to the shop, what we see is the diversity of colors. And what arises from the diversity of colors with these forms is preferences, very strong preferences and attachments. And so we assign different values and measures to these things. And so we can't go beyond form, basically. But when we perceive everything in our mind that comes to our mind that is based on form as yellow, the mind does not grab onto anything. It becomes very vast with that yellow color. So it can be blue, it can be red, whatever color kasina that we use. What is really happening is there's no diversity in perception. And so at that point, it's possible to go beyond the internal perception of that color and the appearance of that form. So the mind becomes very vast, very spacious. So that's the first direction that the Buddha has taught. Then the second one, not perceiving forms internally, he sees forms externally. This is the second direction. So this second direction taught by the Buddha is what happens after abandoning the internal perception. So if we use the same example of going beyond the internal perception of yellow, if we completely apply that yellow color to external forms and to the external world, then we have the ability to go beyond the external color and appearance of form. So not just in the mind, but externally. And so again, the mind develops further and becomes vast and expansive and bright. So the mind is purified. Then the third one is he is resolved upon the beautiful. This is the third direction. So an example of this third direction taught by the Buddha is developing loving kindness. Again, the mind becomes very vast. You will know this if you've practiced this with us through Metta Lab or through other Sutta meditation Dhamma sessions. When we spread loving kindness, immeasurable loving kindness in all directions, if one contemplates that even this loving kindness is not permanent, we can reach the beautiful liberation. So this is the third direction. And this applies to also immeasurable compassion, to all four Brahmaviharas. And with these four Brahmaviharas, we can also reach other liberations as well. So that's the way of practicing that. Another way, actually, of practicing this beautiful liberation is if we contemplate the aging nature of the body, and we see that it is really, truly, genuinely unattractive or foul in nature. So this asubha sanya, that perception is very strong. And at the same time, if we genuinely see that we accept it, that there is an acceptance through the meditation about the aging nature of the body, when we deeply accept it, then there's no ill will that arises with regard to the body. So even when we make contact, if no ill will arises, this is another way to reach the beautiful liberation. So this is the third direction that the Buddha teaches. The fourth is with the complete surmounting of perceptions of form, with the disappearance of perceptions of sensory impact, with non-attention to perceptions of diversity, aware that space is infinite, he enters upon and abides in the base of infinite space. This is the fourth direction. So we know about this meditation from our sessions on the Chula Sunyata Sutta, and more recently the Anenjasapaya Sutta, and even in our meditation on the verse from Chunda Sutta, and even from our sutta meditation on Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta. So this is Dhamma that we have practiced and we can develop. So from our sutta meditations, if we heavily meditate on the four great elements, like if we take the example of the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta, or the first, the meditating on the Gatha, the verse from the Chunda Sutta, particularly the determination for wisdom. When we don't take any of the four great elements as me and mine, so we take our own examples, both internally and externally, and we recognize that earth element, air element, water element, and the heat element, none of it, both are to be taken as me and mine, that they're the same, then we can go beyond form. So form is made out of the four great elements. If we go beyond that, then it's possible to do that. And also through the Chula Sunyata Sutta, it's also possible to actually use the simile of the bull's hide, stretching across the whole earth and using 100 pegs. So all the diverse items of form have disappeared, and so we can transcend the perception of earth and we reach the base of infinite space. So that's another way of doing it. And of course, with Anenjasapaya Sutta, another way of doing it is through contemplating the Buddha's words on sensual pleasures and sensual perceptions. That if we recognize that they're impermanent, hollow, false and deceptive, illusory, the prattle of fools, and we deeply looked at that in our last Uposatha session, then if we successfully abandon these sensual pleasures and sensual perceptions, which are based on form, then we reach the base of infinite space. So Buddha has taught us so many different ways. If you see this quality, that he's the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be tamed, the mind just goes so vast out of so much deep respect, so much gratitude. And knowing if you follow Sutta Meditation series, we can rejoice that we have gone through these types of meditations. And so it's just remarkable and so deeply grateful that the Buddha has been able to convey this to us, and it still exists for us to actually practice. So then the next one, the fifth direction, is by completely surmounting the base of infinite space, aware that consciousness is infinite, he enters upon and abides in the base of infinite consciousness. This is the fifth direction. So before, the Buddha taught us about going to the base of infinite space. So now we want to go beyond that to reach the base of infinite consciousness. And so again, we know that the Buddha has taught us multiple ways to do this. We know that the base of infinite space is where we have the feeling, the Vedana of spaciousness. So in order to attain to the base of infinite consciousness, we contemplate that whatever feeling arises dependent on infinite space, that it's impermanent. And so we don't seek delight, na binandati, we don't welcome, na biwadati, we don't remain holding, na josayatiti, to that feeling of space. Then delight doesn't arise, we don't have the clinging. And so we recognize that the feeling that arises depending on infinite space, it actually passes away. It's impermanent. And so the mind then focuses solely on the base of infinite consciousness. And so another way of actually looking at that is if we maintain infinite space for a long time, so we're dwelling in the base of infinite space, so the darkness, then in our meditation, what we come to realize is it's actually consciousness that is aware that space is infinite. That's how we know that. And then because we've dwelt there for a very long time, if we recognize that we don't even need space, infinite space as the meditation object, and we actually just relinquish that meditation object, then what happens is we reach the base of infinite space. That's how we maintain our concentration. So this is the fifth direction that the Buddha teaches. And so there are also other ways that the Buddha has taught us about this. If you go to Chula Sunyata Sutta and some of the questions that arose from it, there are other methods as well. Then the sixth direction is by completely surmounting the base of infinite consciousness, where there is nothing, he enters upon and abides in the base of nothingness. This is the sixth direction. So again, we want to go beyond the base of infinite consciousness. The Buddha's again taught us multiple ways. So we know from the Dhatu Vibhanga Sutta that a person consists of 6 elements, that there's the earth element, water element, fire element, wind element, space element, of course the consciousness element. So if we empty ourselves of these 6 elements, we ask ourselves, what's left? Well, we're left with no elements, no things, nothing. And so we've already gone beyond the 4 great elements, we've gone beyond space, and so now all we need to do is go beyond infinite consciousness. And so consciousness, we cognize infinite consciousness through the 3 different kinds of feeling. So pleasurable, painful, and neither painful nor pleasurable feeling. And so if you understand dependent origination, that feeling arises dependent on contact. And I always remember the Buddhist simile about the 2 fire sticks, that through contact and friction of the fire sticks, heat is generated, fire is produced, and if they're separated, then the corresponding heat ceases and the fire subsides. So in the same way, when it comes to feeling, if there's no contact, if we have the cessation of feeling, and we determine to give up the 6 elements, and in this case it's really the last one, being the consciousness element, then what we're doing is we're giving up the craving for the feeling. So, in other words, it comes back to our Samadhi Bhavana Sutta meditation. We don't take delight, we don't welcome, we don't remain holding to feeling. And so this is how we enter into the base of nothingness. And then the other way that we went through last session as well was to contemplate the world through the 6 sense experience. And if it is empty of self and empty of what belongs to self, so that, in other words, that means we don't take anything as me and mine. So through the sense base, it's not me and mine. The sense object is not me and mine. The sense consciousness is not me and mine. The sense contact is not me and mine. The feeling that arises from that contact is not me and mine. Everything that makes up the sensory world through the eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind is not mine. If we do that thoroughly, then we can also reach the base of nothingness. So that's another way. And of course, there are other ways as well to reach the base of nothingness. So that's the 6th direction. So you can see, even up until this point, the amount of Dhamma that the Buddha has conveyed and taught, this quality of the Buddha is so immeasurable and vast. It's not a simple quality. That's how we see the Dhamma manifest in the Buddha, and the Buddha, we see the Dhamma. It's just so amazing. So with the 7th direction, the Buddha is now saying we go beyond the base of nothingness to the base of neither perception or non-perception. So again, the Buddha has taught us multiple ways. In the base of nothingness, our mind, we have the perception of nothing. So one way of attaining, in very simple terms, the base of neither perception or non-perception is to abandon the perception that there is nothing. So if one is very skilled, it's possible. Particularly with noble attainment, it's very, very easy. Another way is to contemplate perception as impermanent to the extent that constructed volitional formations are not me and mine. So we've discussed this one at length before in the Chula Sunyata Sutta. So if we resolve to attain to the base of neither perception or non-perception, we don't seek delight in perception, we don't welcome it, we don't remain holding to it, then delight does not arise, clinging does not arise, and so on. So we realize that perception is impermanent, and so that's how we reach the base of neither perception or non-perception. And then the last direction, the eighth direction, is by completely surmounting the base of neither perception or non-perception, he enters upon and abides in the cessation of perception and feeling. So this is where we go beyond the base of neither perception or non-perception to reach the cessation of perception and feeling. So similar to the other 7 perceptions, all of these directions or all of these meditations we construct, that's a very important point to understand. The Buddha is showing us how we construct them. And from realizing and developing these 8 directions in whatever sutta meditations that resonate with us, when we gradually develop them, what we do by using the Buddha's instruction is we understand that these are all supports to see the trickery and what we are still holding on to, like whether it is the aggregates of clinging, the elements, the different things, the sense bases. So we can become very skilled. Like the mastery of the Buddha's instructions is just amazing. And Nirodha Samapatti, this cessation of perception and feeling, is really the closest thing that we can experience to Nibbana. And what is said is that those who are non-returners and those that have developed the path of arahantship, so that it's possible to more easily attain to Nirodha Samapatti. Okay, so then it says, bhikkhus guided by the Tathagata, accomplished and fully enlightened, the person to be tamed goes in these eight directions. So we can see, having understood these 8 directions, we too can go in these 8 directions. And it makes the mind very happy to know, yes, we do have the instructions. We do have the ability to practice. We are becoming more skilled. And so this is what it means when it is said among the teachers of training, it is he that is called the unsurpassed trainer of persons to be trained. So what arises is inspiration to experience these 8 directions, to continue to develop this Dhamma and make progress. And by methodically going through, we can see how much Dhamma we have actually learned. I think that's why it becomes so joyful, because we can actually tangibly see we've learned so much from the Buddha. Through the Buddha's quality, we have learned so much, and the mastery of his instructions has been so profoundly deep and so possible. I don't have the words, but as we can see, it leads to realizing Nibbana. It leads to seeing that Nibbana is really our object and our goal. It brings us closer to that in a more meaningful sense, and it's deeply moving.